Welcome Venus TV viewers, it's the Tonight Show today here with Afzal Akram, here on Tuesday evenings, every Tuesday at 8 o'clock, and we're today going to be talking a little bit about a young lady. I say young lady, we'll talk about that a little bit later, who's been working in the corporate sector for a while, who's a mother, who's a daughter-in-law, who's a grandmother, but somebody who's actually broken through that glass ceiling and worked and been successful, but also somebody who's now turned her attention to the charity sector and is doing some fantastic work with mental health being the key theme. And we're going to be talking about that with our guest, who I shall be introducing to you now, and it's Komal. Komal, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you very much.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for coming on today, and hopefully we're going to be sharing some of your experiences through life, following a little bit about your career and see what's got you here today. So tell us, born here, born abroad?
No, I was actually born in Punjab, near Jalandhar, and came here when I was 6. So typical parents, survived the partition of India, Pakistan, settled in Punjab. Dad was a civil engineer, built one of the biggest Bhakra dams in Punjab, but then there was a calling from Britain to come to the UK from the Commonwealth to come and help build Britain. So Dad in his wisdom decided to come here. So I was the youngest of 6, came here in the 60s.
Very wise, similar to my dad. He came in the early 60s as well, similar sort of story, if you like. So, I mean, you were educated here. So, I mean, coming at the age of 6 is probably not too much different to actually being born here, if you like, yeah? You know, your early years, your education, everything got you through here. You went through college, you went through university. What did you do?
Not quite.
Okay.
Obviously, coming from a very traditional household, because Dad had this great job, I suppose, and this career back home in India. And I must admit, when we came here, most of everybody who came here, most jobs were in factory and production lines. Yes, I did go through the secondary school education, came up with O-levels. So I had some ambitions of going on to further education. I wanted to be a nurse and then go on to being a doctor. But the only job Dad could get was in a factory, like many of people who came here. So I think he had a bit of a chip on his shoulder, to be honest, and didn't feel there was any reason to go on to further education. That, you know, his words, there's no point. So we fell out slightly in that sense. So he said, "Ye kaam karna, you can go and work with the factories with your babbi," and she was working in Burton's at that time.
Okay.
But I had an ally, which was my brother above me, and Avtar Baji, and he spoke to Dad. He said, "Look, she's got some really good qualifications from school. Let's see if she can at least find an office job." So he brought me all these applications home that I started filling in, and one of them happened to be a cashier's job in a bank. And to my surprise, after 300 interviews, I got the job, and that's where I started as a cashier in the Slough branch in TSB.
Okay, fantastic. And then that's the starting of your banking career. And
that became, and so I wasn't really keen on banking because I'd rather have a physical job. So I started as a cashier, but slowly people in the community started recognising that there was a kudi hagi, she's on the counter, she can speak Punjabi and Hindi, she can understand.
Of course, in those days that was a big
problem.
Yeah,
there was hardly anybody else on the counter, so my queue would start getting longer and longer, and I was quite happy to translate, and you know, because I come from a very big family, so to me it was quite normal to start speaking my own language on the counter. And slowly the boss started seeing what I was doing, and I started working a bit harder. So from there I became an assistant manager, and then I did some qualifications, and I became the first ever Asian bank manager in the UK. And they put me in a branch called Walton-on-Thames, which is very British, very upper class, as you probably gathered.
It is.
So it was a challenging time because I was the only, let alone being a woman, being an Asian woman, you know, to come out and say...
Do you think there was a reason for that? Was it a way of them challenging and seeing whether you would do well in that? Or was it just it happened to be the branch that was available?
I think a couple of things. I think, first of all, those people who were shocked that I got promoted into this role were saying, OK, look, right, we're going to give it the most difficult branch.
Most difficult, yeah, that's what I was thinking, yeah.
But I think generally they didn't even think about it. They had no concept of actually, why don't we put her in Southall or keep her in Slough because there's more of a community here, and she'll actually do more good. So I think there was 2 people trying to, you know, jeopardize my career at that time. But actually for me, it was the best learning, because the more people I found out very later in my life, one thing I know about myself, I like to be liked. And when people don't like me, I always try to keep on chipping away. And so when customers were giving me this really cold look, and said, "Can I speak to the bank manager?" Handy, "Can I speak to you?" Yeah. They either thought she can't understand English. Yeah. No, can I speak to the bank manager? Yes, a bit slower and louder. And can I help you? And they look at me up and down. Who's this woman? But it really did help ground my resilience, I suppose. And from there, I carried on working hard. I ended up running about 160 branches across the whole of South East, from Oxford to Bedford to Guildford in my little red Fiesta. And I loved the job, actually. Really, felt it was like my bank over those 160. And then things changed, don't they? And then Lloyds and TSB decided to merge as one bank. It really shook us all up a bit, because at that same time they decided to take a lot of the calls to India. A lot of our work went to India, and so everybody was getting really confused, because you're trying to have this new computer system, you're trying to bring two banks together at the same time, so complaints with customers went through the roof. And the other thing I knew about myself is actually I just couldn't understand why this was all going wrong. So I started bringing people from the back office, the front office, to really understand, why is this not working? So I started an initiative called Working Together Smarter. And then slowly, within about 6 months, we found processes that weren't working. My complaints started going down. My 160 branches really started doing well. And there was somebody in the executive office who was obviously had his data and could see, wait a minute, all of these branches are doing really crap, and this area is doing really well. So he came out of his ivory tower and came to see me. And I'll never ever forget him, because he was my first hero in the banking world, Paul Baker, who saw what I was doing, really liked it, and left me his business card, and said, "If you ever need my help, phone karte." About a few months later, the merger really bit. My role disappeared, my branches got cut up, and they were offering me jobs that really weren't suited for me. So I called him up and said, "Look, Paul, I don't know if you remember me, but I'm thinking of leaving." And then he said, "Look, get on a train, come to London." And that initiative, 160 branches, I want you to roll it right across the bank.
Wow.
And we talked about 2,500
So the merger was probably one of the best things for you individually.
It's the best thing. Sometimes, the bad, they say, ek door band hundi hai, dusri khul jandi hai. And for me, and my dad was going, "Oh my God, how am I going to do that? I know my branches." But I said, well, if I got to lose, I'm going to be made redundant anyway. So I got on the train. It's the first time I ever got on a train to London. Went to see him, and he said, "Don't worry, we'll sort it out. I'll help you understand the structure of the bank. Just do what you're doing, and we'll just replicate it." And then I entered our head office,
the corporate
world, and it was like as though I'd something coming out the alien world, because in retail, at least in branches, and you did find females sitting as cashiers.
Is this the 1990s we're talking?
This is now the end of 1990s. But here I am in the corporate glass ceiling in Gresham Street, a sea of white faces, mostly men. Middle-aged men who started looking at me as though, I'm some kind of strange woman who's come from a different planet. It was okay, but I started feeling that, jada main gal kardi si, my voice was quite soft, as you can recognize, and quite respectful. And so they started undermining me, or if I had an idea, they'll steal it. And 2 minutes later, Paul over there would say that, "Oh, that's really good, Paul." And realize that, well, hold a minute, why are they undermining me, and why is this happening? And then so I started asking other females, other ethnic minorities, "Do you feel like this?" So I found about 400 people across 150,000 that were either female or ethnic minorities. And so I set up the network for the Ethnic Minority Network and the Women's Network. Now every company has networks, but this was a time there was no networks. Okay. And it's purely to have a conversation like we're having a conversation. Do you feel like this? Do you feel discriminated against? What's the issue? And soon I started realizing, actually, the culture I'm brought up with, we're brought up to be respectful to Siane Bande, to not boast about what you do. You want, and then if your boss is saying you're not quite right, you say, "Hantika, of course I'm not right," and then hanji kari chalo. But actually, in the corporate world, it's totally different. You have to fight for yourself.
Well, just on that point, I
Yeah.
mean, statistics tell us, and as well, that women are not so good. I'm talking about across the patch, not just Asian
Absolutely.
women, in getting pay rises or getting promotions.
seen all the-
because
yeah.
they don't talk about it, they don't big themselves up.
Well,
They accept what
not
they're
only,
doing.
you know, if you go for a job, we know that, and you're absolutely right, there's stats there that if there's a job application, a woman will feel that she has to be 120% confident that she can do the job. Whereas a man, even if it's 70% of that job, he'll apply
He'll
for
still
it.
go
He's
for
more
it.
confident.
Yeah.
And so women tend to stay behind. And then obviously you add on top on that, you take maternity leave, so you're left behind in a couple of years or sometimes. So that is a huge pay gap difference. But I'm proud to say that, you know, with all of that, I did my first talk in front of these minority, and there was somebody there from the government who heard my speech. And they said, Kamal, look, in 2012, we're thinking of bidding for the Olympic Games. But this is now 10 years later. But we know that we need to improve our supply diversity and procurement. And, you know, can you lead that task force for us and help us? Between you and me, I didn't know what she was talking about.
But you did the Mel thing and said yes.
I did the thing. Actually, you know what? Okay, I'll try. I don't know what you're talking about, Megan. So it's a voluntary role outside of the bank, and in the evenings I used to go to the minister's office, and then we had these ministers and everyone there. And the first couple of meetings were a total disaster. I couldn't really handle them, didn't understand the language because it was so different to the private sector. But I'm proud to say 18 months later, it was the best white paper across government, really shaped the way that they gave contracts out and became the bedrock of the bid for the Olympic Games.
And that was probably the first bit moving from a corporate to other sectors, and we'll talk about that in a moment, yeah? So viewers, we're going to go on a short break at the moment for now, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about Kamal, and we're going to see how she shifted from the corporate world, working towards the charity sector, and why she did that as well. So stay tuned, and we'll see you shortly. Welcome back, viewers, to The Tonight Show with Afzal Akram here today. We were talking in the first section with Kamal about her role, how she came to the UK, how she worked her way through the corporate sector, working in banking, and we're coming towards the end of we're going to talk about now how she exited banking and started working her way through the charitable field or public sector on there. So Kamal, just coming back to you, we were talking about you working on the Olympics project with Lloyds TSB. So where did you go on from there then?
Well, once I did that, it gave me a really huge boost of confidence because these ministers thought I was so much more senior and whatever. And one of the things I had in my mind, my husband was always saying access to finance was difficult, and Kamal, your bank is very British, doesn't understand us. So I did my research and realised how big the community was and the sectors it was growing in. So basically I presented a business case to the board. They gave me 20 minutes to come and present. They loved my idea. And they basically said, right, we'll give you 6 months to go and do this, but we're not going to backfill your role, so you might lose your job at the end of 6 months. So
if it doesn't work.
Yeah. So my husband was, oh my God, what the hell are you doing? Sort of thing. But with this, I said I felt we had something there, and so I started doing that. So I designed my own. I said, look, if you want this, we're going to have to improve our cultural understanding. We haven't got the products. We don't know how to communicate. We need to have to actually, contact the business people first of all. So I designed my own cultural training courses, trained up to 500 execs. We looked at our products. I designed the first ever Sharia compliant business account for the bank. We looked at community awards, so designed the Asian Jewel Awards, the Asian Women of Achievement Awards.
I was nominated for an Asian Jewel
Award. There you are. So we started them with, that was the first one, so I did 30 of those.
Right, okay, wow.
So that's who I started off with, very much in the beginning. So we had one in Manchester, Birmingham and in London.
Yeah.
And it really helped the community and the bank to get together because we raised the profile of people like yourself on stage. But for my relationship managers allowed to network, I taught them how to network the community, and within 4 years we became leaders in the market. So I was really enjoying myself. So from there I got headhunted into corporate banking by Truett Tate, this tall American who came in from the exec board and said, look, come on, we want to take it globally. So I remember taking a delegation with Gordon Brown to India. So really, really enjoyed the role. And my role got bigger and bigger until 2008 when the banking crisis happened. And our bank was asked by the government to rescue another bank. HBOS and Royal Bank of Scotland, and unfortunately we did it and it took us down with it. So we had to be rescued by them, but government ourselves. overnight 150,000 people hated the company. Because when your share price is tumbling from £10, £6 to 32p, you know, people really hate you. The government asked our board to all completely step down, and because I was now reporting to the board, my division got shut down as well, and was asked to leave. And as I was exiting, the old CEO spoke to the new CEO and said, look, you're going to have to build trust with customers and pride with colleagues again. There was a girl here, a woman here who's done it before with us. Maybe she can help you. So basically they asked me to stay on. And so I had to think of creative ways of actually helping the bank. Then I started thinking, if that volunteering role did that for me, increased my confidence and got me to start thinking about different ways. And I'm a Sikh, and one of the things that we believe in is seva. And if seva constantly makes you feel proud of what you're trying to do, could that instill that with my colleagues? So basically, I started looking at charity community programs. I looked at volunteering and completely transformed the way that we did charity programs. So I took on Alzheimer's Society, BBC Children Need, Mental Health UK.
Was this part of the
this
corporate
is part
social
of the corporate
responsibility?
structure. Yes, it was. But rather than shaking a bucket and, you know, raising funds, I did it as a partnership approach. So what with Alzheimer's could we do to really change the way that the charity was thinking? So we designed the Dementia Friends program, which now have got nearly 3.5 million people who understand more about dementia. We looked at our policies, and you know, when you've got chip and pin and you put your chip number in, well, if you've got dementia, you don't remember your pin.
That's right, yeah.
So we changed our policies and so forth. And then I joined it with volunteering. So what could my colleagues go and do volunteering? What could staff do? And so that formula really, so staff got more involved. They were going out there, getting involved with the charity. And because of that, 85,000 people beginning to start putting their hands up for me and saying, I want to do volunteering. And all of that mindset and that pride against in the company, because they were coming back thinking much more agile thinking, much more creative thinking, and actually much more loyal to the bank to allow them to go in the first place. And then finally, we were marking our 250th anniversary, the bank was, and they asked me to lead that as well. Again, I brought people together. What would our party look like? Because we're still a bank, we're still publicly owned. And then I made it about Britain. So we've been here for 250 years. I wrote a book with Ruth Goodman, dug a Spitfire in the Somerset with Dan Snow. We funded a Spitfire the bank had, or the colleagues had, in World War II, called the Black Horse, and we found that and we funded that. So in that year we did all sorts of stuff around community, and that really, I think, shifted the way that the people were thinking about the company. Paid the government back, we're paying publicly owned. Right. And I was given a target raising 6 million. We raised £20 million for good causes. So I decided to retire in 2017 for two reasons. One, my daughter-in-law was expecting, and I thought, right, is it time to now become a grandmother and stay at home? But secondly, there was a huge
that was the traditional way of doing things, wasn't it?
Yeah. So, but there was a huge restructure as well at the same time with the bank. So I negotiated a package and left. And then, you know, my children said, Mum, you know, you've been working so hard to get to where you are. Really, we don't want seeing you sitting at home just being a full-time grandmother. And we're thinking of putting the little one into nursery anyway. So I looked at, and then basically I got approached by a number of charities who'd seen what I've been doing for the last 6 years. So Alzheimer's Society asked me to come along and be their ambassador. Teenage Cancer Trust said, could I be their trustee? And then I'm proud to say the Queen's Commonwealth Trust Fund also asked me to be their special advisor. So that's working across 53 countries with Prince Harry and the Queen. And Her Majesty wanted this foundation. She sets it up for every 10 years. So this one, she wanted it for the youth of the Commonwealth. She wants young people to take on the society. So I work with them on advising them. And that's where I'm really proud of, actually. That's the work I do. But the one that's really closest to my heart, I would say, is Alzheimer's. I'm a non-exec on a couple of companies as well, where we go into corporates, which has been really still close to my heart, which is actually how do we help females, how do we help gender.
You're still trying to change that corporate
Absolutely.
structure, mentality, culture.
Yeah, so I've got about 90 companies, and we basically go in there through storytelling to really shift and challenge them, actually. Why is there still a gap between the pay gap for the women, for example? Why is it there's hardly any ethnic minorities on the boards? So we challenge them in the so what question. And it's beginning to have an impact, so I'm really proud of that, and I'm proud to say that that's what the Queen gave me the OBE for the work I've been doing in diversity.
Excellent. And what are the major differences you find between the corporate sector and the charity sector? Is the mentality in the charity sector any different?
Absolutely, and I think that's where I felt, having worked in the corporate sector and been there for 38 odd years, I could help the charity sector really look at their governance, on how they operate and how they actually think of actually when they go to knock on a door of a big corporate and saying, look, we want you to be your charity of the year. I would say the charities were a bit arrogant and a bit naive, and they said, oh, well, because we're doing good, you should support us.
Yeah.
So rather than saying, actually, what is this company about? What is their plans? What are they struggling with? What are their future plans? And what role can we play in actually either helping their image, helping their brand, or actually helping their colleagues to become more like we were.
It wasn't a case of what can I do for you, it was more a case
of
give us money.
Yeah, give us money. And so I'm proud to say that's what I'm really known for, is actually going into charities, helping them with their governance, challenging them on how they actually present themselves, looking at their fundraising techniques and so forth. So now I coach a lot on fundraising, I coach a lot on how to pitch to corporate worlds, but then I go in the pitching process as well. So I've got the corporate person sitting there, and because I've been there, I've worn the t-shirt, I can actually look at the corporate person and I said, look, we can help this partnership work. What's in it for you? This and this and this. This is good for your brand. This is, and so it helps them understand the value of return on investment for them as well, because at the end of the day, taking on a charity is not cheap. But if there's a connection there, it can really be a powerful partnership. So I'm proud to say that's what I'm supporting mostly on those.
Great. And you talked a little bit about the Alzheimer's and something you're involved in, and that's quite close to you and quite close to your heart. Is there a personal reason behind that, or?
Yeah, I mean, I've got more involved in the mental health capacity and Alzheimer's, especially dementia. I mentioned that I, live in a family, so I had an arranged marriage at the age of 18, which is what my parents wanted me to do. And one thing, Sikya, that my mother gave me, was one of these things that, your duty of care is to look after your in-laws. Your duty of care is to be a dutiful wife. And your duty of care is don't come running home complaining to your brothers if something goes wrong. So that sense of honour, I think, is a huge burden on, especially on females, when you take that transition into a new home. And the home is very traditional, and you have a role to play, which was what they expected. They didn't quite understand my banking career at that time, but my father-in-law was a huge liberator, way ahead of his time, and he helped me to help and understand, look, Kamal, if you want this job, just don't tell the women what you're doing, but also you're going to have to do all the chores at home. And that's how I suppose life became. So I became a split personality. So this corporate banker.
You open the front door, walk in, and you're a different person.
And absolutely, when I go home, Salvar Kameez Market, really zip your mouth and be what is expected of a female in those traditional times. Things have changed now.
I was going to say everything's
absolutely
changed,
now I was going to say I have 4 generations, 37 years later, I was still living with my mother-in-law, caring for her. So I hope my mum, bless her soul, she passed away when I was 34, was proud of what I achieved. But all of this does take its toll, because you're expected not to share anything with anyone. So in our community, what I'm finding, mental health is rife, depression is rife, because we're said, don't, launder your dirty linen outside, which I absolutely respect. And, if there's an understanding in the household, though, if there is a foundation there that you can talk to somebody and say, look, I'm struggling, or what's going on. But I think in my generation and my in-laws' generation, that sort of communication wasn't really there.
I think part of it also, my own experience as a former chairman of a primary care trust, was that in our culture, whether you're a Sikh, Hindu, Muslim, or so on, whenever somebody has a mental health issue, they don't see it as an illness. They see it a bit like a disease.
Absolutely.
And they shut it away.
And
they don't want anyone to.
Exactly.
And they're embarrassed about it, instead of trying to get some help for somebody.
And the only thing that they have the word for it, sadai ho gaya, or sadain ho gaya, or it's pata nahi enu ki hoya, it's samjh nahi aunਦੀ, ਸਭ ਕੁਝ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ. So those things, unfortunately, because lack of understanding, and I, my second child, I was going through some kind of postnatal depression. I knew, but there was no way of me recognizing it and seeking that help. So where I see in our community, so depression, mental health, and one of my uncles unfortunately had dementia, and we didn't know. We didn't even recognise that that's what he had until it was too late. And we've got another uncle who now is going and really struggling, and poor auntie is looking after him herself. So now I feel, my mother-in-law passed away in June, and for the last 6 years her health has really, really deteriorated, and it does take its toll on the carers of the individuals, because I think people forget when you're in that scenario 24/7 looking after a loved one that you care about, it does eventually take its toll on you. And I knew it was taking its toll on me, but I'm fortunate that my sons live with me. My daughter-in-law's decided to live with me, so we've got a complex household. We've got now I've got grandchildren, 3 grandchildren in the house. 4 generations living one household is quite complicated, and you're trying to navigate that. Trying to give my daughter-in-laws the opportunities that maybe I didn't have as easy as I did. I want them to have a career if that's what they want.
But trying to keep that culture there and trying.
Absolutely, but at the same time, I want my sons to be different type of husbands. I want them to be sitting barobar next to their wives rather than behind or in front, and I want their wives to have a say in the way that they bring up their children. Now, if you've got an older person sitting there, my mother-in-law, she was dictating. Well, that's not right. And so I'm sort of like the arbitrator in between, managing everything, all of that. So all of those issues, and I'm not the only one. I know household to household are struggling with communication within ourselves, within the generations, and especially as as girls now normally get married, the first thing that I don't want to live with my mother-in-law. And I understand it, because we haven't really helped our community on how to communicate, how to have a conversation without having an argument.
Yeah. It's not a battle, it's just a conversation.
It's just a conversation, especially as a son or a daughter-in-law. If you feel that you want a different type of career, or you have got concerns about marriage, how can you have a conversation without getting upset? How can you have a conversation with your loved one or your parents to explain what you're feeling without saying the only way is I'm going to pack my bags and go? So I wish there was a way that we could communicate better. But unfortunately, all of this, I think, is now having its toll on our community, that there are more people getting depressed. We have a higher rate, you might know about being diabetic. We have higher rates of heart conditions. And that then actually is now impacting our mental health and going to dementia. So in this country, at this moment, 850,000 people are suffering from dementia. Living with dementia.
Well, hold that thought there. Hopefully shows and programs like this will help people have that conversation in their living rooms like we're having now. We're going to go for a short break, viewers, so if you stay with us, we're going to come back and talk a little bit more in detail about mental health and how we can get support for our communities and open that conversation. So stay tuned, and we'll see you in a while. Welcome back, Venus TV viewers. It's the Tonight Show with Afzal Akram here today, and we've been talking to Kamal, who's our guest today, about how she came to the UK when she was 6, how she's grown up. It was a bit of a struggle to get into a workplace from a traditional Sikh family, how she then escalated through the corporate world, through banking, worked at head office, and also how she then exited through that and started working with charities. And we were getting onto the bit about working with mental health, how communication is a big issue between us Asian families. And it's a fact, the first generation find it very difficult to talk to the third or fourth generation, as do some of the second generation. And so in this final part, I want to talk to Kamal about how we can break down some of those barriers on communication, and especially the one that's quite core to my heart as well as Kamal, having spoken to her, is mental health. How can we as a community get some help and talk about that? So Kamal, come back to you really, and we talked about communication. What can we do as communities, as families, as 3-4 generations living together? How can we better improve our communication?
I think first of all, realise you've got a lot to lose. A 1-minute argument is not going to solve the problem for you. And if your children mean so much to you, is actually how do you find the courage to keep quiet and listen? That's the first of all. And if you can't do it, find an uncle or an aunt who can arbitrate and come in and sometimes help that conversation. We've too much kept things within the family circle until it's too late. So especially for children, if you're struggling in communicating your messages to your parents or your grandparents, is there a trusted advisor? Is there somebody you trust that knows the family, that can come in with you and have that conversation? That's what I would say first of all. But also more importantly, go and seek help. If you feel you are struggling and you feel you're going that dark hole and you're constantly thinking about everything's going wrong, everything's, negative, everything, you always think, oh, mara mara ho jana, everything's against me, everyone hates me. When you start thinking like that and you go down that dark hole, please go and seek help. And I mean, go to your doctor. Just talk to them. These are my thoughts. These are the things that are going into my head. Mera ji nahi karda bed de vich uthan nu, mera ji nahi karda kuch khan nu, or I just snap at everyone. I don't understand it, why I get so angry or upset. I want to cry all the time. Little symptoms you should know yourself. I'm not myself. Or somebody in your family. If you know that your mum or your dad, they're feeling a bit quiet, they've gone a bit quiet, or mum keeps on crying, or she's a bit more emotional than she normally is, advise them to go and seek help. They might not be able to talk to you. So the doctor, I would say, is the first port of call, who should be able to help diagnose and either give you some offer for help for counselling. And again, have the trust in the doctor, because we don't like talking to counsellors. You think, oh my gosh, if I'm going to go and see a counsellor, does that mean mera dimag kharab ho gaya? And what would community think? It's
that is a thing, isn't
it? But honestly, we've got to break out of this. They're just another form of a doctor that you're instead of dwai, everybody thinks goriyan na sab kuch theek ho jana. I'd rather take medication rather than talk to somebody.
But words sometimes are as powerful as physical medicine.
Absolutely. And sometimes all you need is to be able to apaaf kaddani hundi hai. And sometimes talking to a professional is easier to explain, because they know and they'll be able to guide you what those issues are and what those things are. So I would say go and seek help, go and see a counsellor, go and talk to somebody. Nowadays, especially for the next generation, I advise you, there are so many websites out there on where there'll be, the Calm app and so forth, that you can actually download that can help you to meditate, that can help you to actually, my mind's all over the place, I can't think straight, I can't, I can't make a decision. Well, go and seek help on the websites. There's lots of now really lovely apps that you can download 10-15 minutes before you get out of bed, just to help you to, find your balance and find yourself.
And how do we as a community get away from thinking that mental health is a disease and there's something wrong with it, towards thinking that mental health is an illness, just like the flu or just like diabetes or just like something else, and there is a treatment for it?
Because, and it's not just in our community is worse though, but it's easy. If meri lat tutti hove, or if I've broken my leg, you're going to give me sympathy, right? But actually, if I'm sitting down quietly and I'm depressed, you wouldn't want to even talk to me.
Snap out of it. What's wrong with you?
So it's actually understanding the causes of those issues. Now, there are two. There's mental health, which is causing depressive states, that by talking, by some medication maybe as well, you could actually find a route out of it. But the other one I'd like to just focus on is dementia, because, as a community, we're, as I said, more prone to be diabetic. We're more prone to actually have heart conditions. And they then are stepping stones, unfortunately, to dementia, which is another illness, that we don't really recognize in our community. And, when you start forgetting things, and there's only one, or they make you feel embarrassed, because one minute the same person's having a conversation with you, the second minute they've forgotten who you are. So there are signs there that you should be wary of, that actually this is not normal. And people laugh it off. There's a difference. And the example I would use is, if you're going shopping, and we always forget, where did I park my car?
That's right.
But that's normal.
Or the shopping list, if it's not written down.
I've forgotten how my car, that's normal. But the challenge is if you start saying, how did I get here? That is the first impression, as a warning sign to yourself, actually. I don't even remember how I got here, let alone who drove me here.
So what do you do with that? I mean, that's an early sign, isn't it?
Those
so what
are
do you
early
do
signs.
on those early
so
signs?
early signs, if you feel that you're forgetting things, or you're forgetting names, or you're forgetting actually, mera rishta ki hai, aadmi na ya janani na, or whatever it is, or actually those are the key signs. And if they're becoming regular, again, go to your doctor. Now you can actually go and have a test done. That will actually show you whether you are actually on the early signs of dementia. And I'm please, my plea would be the earlier you can get diagnosed.
Of course.
Now we haven't got a cure for it, unfortunately.
But we can slow it down.
We can slow it down.
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two is families. If you feel that there's something wrong with your family, because usually, you know, going back to one of our relatives who had it, you know, the first thing the gentleman started doing was, because if roti in the lunchtime, if he'd have roti at a different time, he'd forgotten he'd had it. So when his other younger son would come in, he said, "Aaj main roti nahi khilai kisi ne." And then the daughter went, "Dad, you had roti."
Yeah.
And then first thing was arguments. "Oh my God, you're not looking after my dad properly." "Well, no, I am. I did it. He's lying. Rather than thinking, actually, the poor gentleman's actually is now going on a steep learning curve on down to dementia. And it wasn't recognised until it was too late, because the family got so broiled in trying to understand, actually, is this an issue? He doesn't want to live with you or something. Is please be wary of, if people are forgetting things, there might be another reason, and take your loved one to the doctor and have a conversation with the doctor and say, "Look, I'm really concerned, could you test him out?" Because if we can slow it down, we can help. The other thing I would say, people who have got dementia, they're still the same person.
My mum went through it, so I've been through that. Yeah.
You would know they still. The fact that they may not recognise that
they have
you're,
good days
you know,
and bad days.
Absolutely.
That's what it is at the end of the day.
You know, and recently we went to a wedding, and you know, the son's mother was having a chat with me, and her father's got dementia. Again, they come, "Well, I'm thinking of bringing Dad in." I said, "Kyun?" You know, jadon gaane lagde hai na, he remembers the Bhangra song and he'll start dancing as though he was 19. And I said, "Benji, you know what? That's the best thing you can do for him, because in his mind he's still living."
Sure.
And
stay with us on that, Kamal. I think we have a caller. Hello, caller. Hello. Hello, caller. Hi, how are you?
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. How come? What would you like to say, sir?
I would like to, you are talking about this mental health. I would like to know, in this particularly in Asian community, is there mainly social factors involved, like isolation or lack of family cohesion, or some other factors also? Because I've seen a lot of Asian people getting into dementia and other mental illnesses. So what are the main reasons for that?
Thank you very much for your question. A very good question. Is it social factors? Is it loneliness? Or is it something genetic?
No,
what is it?
I mean, unfortunately, dementia is so complicated, and there are so many factors. Sometimes it is due to your own, if you've got a heart condition, as I said, if you've got diabetic, sometimes those conditions do come through because through illness. But others, you're absolutely right, is due to social issues. So if you are alone, especially if you're a generation like my mother-in-law was, so used to having family around you, and all of a sudden you're isolated and you've got nobody around. And what you do, you start ending up being isolated. You stay in your home. You don't talk to anybody. So that causes depression. Depression then slowly mingles away and can lead on to dementia, unfortunately. So it is a mix. It's not an easy answer to your question, but yes, it could be dealt through heart conditions, could lead on to dementia, or it is social issues, and depression is usually one of the causes that leads on to depression, onto dementia as well.
Right. And, one of the things we can be there for our community is, like you say, spot those signs.
Yes.
And talk to the person, try to encourage them to get help. Use live examples of, I've been through this, I've seen somebody been through this.
Absolutely, and especially the older generation who now may be living on their own when they're not used to it. I mean, we've got some lovely we're a community society, aren't we, as an Asian community? That was the first thing when we came here, was whether it would be through the Gurdwara or the mosque, everybody went there. You get together. And even if you used to go to the parks, you'd see the elderly gentlemen sitting there having their conversations. Right. Those are getting smaller and smaller. So if you've got spare time on your hand, I would encourage you, set up clubs, set up groups, go walks together, you know, especially in your own road. We hardly ever now talk to our neighbours. Get to know your neighbours. And if you don't want to walk alone, because people, especially if you're a female, you're embarrassed, and especially if you're a siani banda, you know, I don't want to walk on my own. Shama dekpongi, minukoi haniga. Well, talk to the people down the road. Talk to the Gurdwaras. Don't just go and sit at the Gurdwaras or the mosque. Actually say, chal chaliye, torke chaliye. Go for a half an hour. Walking is one of the best ways of actually combating and reducing dementia. Is physically active.
Not only is it physical activity, but it's keeping you mentally alert.
It's giving you mentally, and get involved in things. You know, if you've got grandchildren, what a better way to getting involved with grandchildren. Go and see their plays. Go and look at their sports ground. Get involved with their activities, because that's another way of having conversation with your children will keep your mental health active.
Well, Kamal, great. Thank you for coming on. Learnt quite a lot, not only about how, you know, you've broken through the corporate sector, not only how you have achieved, and this is a sign for our viewers listening at home. If you want to achieve something, you can achieve something. You've just got to set your goals and you've got to work towards it. Yes, work towards it, set your goals and don't give up. And then obviously Kamal has now gone into the charitable sector, and mental health is something that is very important to our communities. My own mother, as viewers will know, we did a program on it as well, suffered from dementia. So at first hand I've seen how a person changes, but at the same time it's the same person. It's that same person. It's a person you've loved every day of your life on there, but help is available. Maybe our mosques, gurdwaras, temples need to do a little bit more. They need to put on a few more sessions, get people encouraged, not just as Kamal said, come and sit there, but go out, whether it's an outing, a day at the seaside, it's a walk around the block with people, but it's about keeping people active and keep moving. And last but not least, please viewers, talk to one another. It's so important talking to one another, whether it's the first generation talking to the children or the other way around. Please do talk, get to know each other, and there is no harm in asking for help. Thank you for tuning into today's show. Hopefully see you next week on The Tonight Show with Afzal Akram, where we'll have another guest and we'll be talking on another topic. Have a fantastic week.